I want to talk briefly on some additional form controls that we can use that were introduced in HTML5. And they're pretty cool. I've got a big list of different types of input types that are available, and then some other ones that I'll show here at the end. But we have different things like color and date, and I've got some examples here. So in this one right here, we do an input type equals color, and you can even give it a pre-value, but this allows us to have a little drop down that will show up, and I can choose that color and then hit submit. Let me close that, and you'll see how it will send the hex value back to the browser or to the processor, if you will. You can see we have a date field here, and again for this one it's an input type equals date, and this one allows you to drop down a little calendar and select a date and hit submit and pass it through. This one allows you to type in something, so if I type in some characters and hit submit, it's looking for an email. So if I say at domain.com or something, then it would accept it and allow it to come through. So another form of validation. This one here allows you to choose, if you click on that, you can go through and upload a specific file if you want. Now, that's not actually going to upload anything because you need to have some kind of PHP file to accept that file and to store that file and do something with it. But you can use this input type here to select what file you do wish to do, and it will send it through. So that's kind of a cool one too. This one is called an input type equals number, and it allows you to set a min and a max. And so you can go through and you can type something in. I'm trying to type in 7 and it's not going to allow me to. Okay, so I've got to go down to 5. It also gives me a little number here that I can click up and down on, and it won't let me click above or below the 1 and 5, and so you can send the data that way. This one is kind of similar, but this allows me to move a slider back and forth. And this one's going to set a min and a max. And a min, if you're on this end, and a max if you're on that end. And you just do a type equals range, and it gives you that functionality, and you can see how that was sent through that number. This one is used for input type equals search, and it's more for search engines. It doesn't actually send anything back to Google to have a search or anything like that. But if you did have a search function built into your page, you could use this type equals search, and it would allow you to work more like a regular text field, is I think what they say about this. This one's a telephone, and if I try to type in some characters and submit it, you can see it doesn't match that. So this one in particular is using some regular expressions, and they're trying to have you match this format type you can see here. And if I type in just a whole bunch of numbers, it's not letting me through. And if you want to dig some more into regular expressions, they're pretty awesome, but a little difficult to understand if you aren't familiar with those or haven't seen them before. You look at that and it's a little tricky to kind of see, but you can see we've got characters or digits 0 through 9, and then it's expecting at least 3 of them, and then a dash, and 0 through 9 and 2 of them. You can kind of see how that pattern might work, but it gets pretty complex with some different patterns, but you can pass that through in some of these things, and it's being used here in this telephone. This one is using an input, a URL input field, and it doesn't really do any validation or anything like that, as you can see, but typically you'd want to put in some kind of HTTP address and send it, but it's just one that they've got. I've got some illegal input here. That's funny. And last, this one isn't an input type, but it's called a data list. And the way that this works is you use an input, but then you say list equals browsers. Now this browsers is a word that you come up with. It's kind of like your list of items. And then you tag that back to an ID, and in this case they've matched those two up. And they've given options, kind of like you would with a select list. But the way that this works is I can click on it, and I can pick. It has that drop-down functionality. Or I can just start typing. If I start typing out Chrome, or I typed out I, it's looking for anything with an I in it. Things like that. And then you can select if you want and then hit submit. So it makes it a little bit easier selecting if you can pre-populate these options. And the way you do that, again, is you would use a processor to go out, get the data, and then place the data here for it to show up in your browser. A little bit more complex than where we're at in this class, but as you kind of progress through web development and design, you'll start seeing some of these things like regex and processing and things like that. We're just scratching the surface with web design, and you're starting to get little glimpses into the back end of code. But these are all some really kind of cool and more advanced input types you can use to communicate back with your servers.